Hello and welcome to the Fin to the Woods podcast with me, Finian Hackett. I hope you're all doing well. It's been a fairly quiet week for me over the last 7 days or so since the last episode, and I haven't really done that much, so I haven't got a lot to update you on already. I did climb the O2. That is quite exciting, not theatre related, but quite exciting nonetheless. We also went to the Barbican and went in their conservatory there where all the plants looked slightly dead, but it was free, so we shouldn't really complain, but we had a lovely time up in London, had a lovely day. But next week I am going to see, this week I'm going to see Starlight Express on Sunday, and on Saturday I'm doing something very exciting which I don't want to put out into the universe because I'm worried it's going to jinx it and it won't happen, but I will tell you all about it because it's very exciting, and you might even see me if you're watching at that time. Who knows? Cryptic clues from me today. But I want to talk first about this new project that I'm trying to kind of cultivate currently. And I want to do this thing on my TikTok where I look at different theatres across the country that were once derelict or weren't running properly or were on the brink of closure and have since been rejuvenated, funded, and are now thriving, important businesses for the local towns that they serve. And I've already had a few emails from people and a few messages from people about projects near them, but if you have anything that you think would be useful, please do email me at fintothewoods@gmail.com or message me on my Instagram at Finian Hackett. I want to get as many as I can so then I can start making these TikTok videos and putting them out to the world and just raising awareness of all these venues that really have kind of gone against the tide and managed to turn their fortunes around and thrive once more. I think it's so important to shine a light on them because so many theatres across the country just don't get the funding that they need, and they don't get the support they need from the local community. Lots of people take it for granted, and without that support, these theatres do just die. And I think it's so important to show that it can be done, they can be saved, and just to raise awareness and hopefully inspire people to get involved with their local venues and maybe become a friend of the theatre or a supporter or whatever their scheme might be. I know firsthand from my family and what they've done with the Hippodrome in Eastbourne that if you have the money and the funding behind a project and you have the support of the local community and the friends of the theatre, all together that's created such a positive atmosphere and one that is pushing the theatre into new places and helping it grow from a place that was going to be knocked down and turned into a car park. So the fortunes have been turned around over the last 20 years or so. But that happens all the time, and I just want to shine a light on all of those stories. So yes, if you have anything, email me, message me, and I'll get those stories out there, and I might even talk about them on here if they're really interesting. Right, let's delve into talking about new production announcements this last week. There's been quite a lot, actually. I've been quite inundated with things to talk about, which is exciting. So the first one is Christmas related. I know last week I said we're not going to talk about Christmas, but now I've given up. We're going to have to, because as soon as it turns September, it becomes Christmas time for theatre. So we're going in at the deep end today and talking about Elf. Elf the musical will be returning to Broadway for Christmas this year. It will run from the 9th of November to the 4th of January at the Marquee Theatre on Broadway. It will star Mean Girls Tony nominee Gray Henson as Buddy the Elf, and this isn't the first time that Elf has been on Broadway. As I said, it's a return. The original Broadway cast in 2010 starred Sebastian Arcellus, who's been in many things, but is also the husband to Stephanie J. Block, and he played the role of Buddy, and that was at the Al Hirschfeld for a Christmas run from 2010 to early 2011, and it returned to the same theatre for Christmas 2012, and it had its West End premiere in 2015 at the Dominion. It's a seemingly very popular show. I've heard chatter that it could be going into Drury Lane over Christmas, but I think that might have died down now, unless it's announced while I'm recording this podcast, which happened last week. What was it? This news was announced while I was recording the episode, and I got back off recording and checked my phone, and I was like, it's going to have to wait until next week. It happens all the time. That's because there's so much theatre news coming out. But yes, Elf is back on Broadway. I've never seen it. I've seen the film, but I've never seen the musical. I know a few of the songs because a few years back they made it into some animated kind of TV version called like Buddy's Magical Adventure or something like that. And it was all stop motion animation. I think Jim Parsons was in it. I don't remember much about it, but I watched it one Christmas on ITV. And that's all I kind of know of the show. But it's seemingly very popular. And I mean, if a theatre's empty on Broadway over Christmas, why not put a Christmas show in that's going to sell like hotcakes? It's a very clever idea, and one that I think is a business model that lots of places follow on Broadway and in the West End. If there's an empty theatre, they shove in something Christmas Carol related, or Elf, or White Christmas, especially at the Dominion. That seems to always have those kind of shows, but they always sell. Twiggy the musical will open in Cheltenham for a tour next year. So this is a musical based on the life and times of the model Twiggy. It's going to be written and directed by Ben Elton, and it's going to premiere in September 2025 at the Cheltenham Everyman Theatre and then tour the UK. So this isn't a brand new show. This premiered at the Meniere Chocolate Factory, I think, last year. And this production that they're doing in Cheltenham is a brand new production, and I imagine there'll be rejigs, as there is with any new musical. It might premiere somewhere but then move somewhere the following year and they've got rid of some songs or got rid of some characters. It happens all the time, and funnily enough, in a bit I'm going to be talking about a certain show that's been changed many, many times over the years. But yes, so if you want to go and see the Twiggy musical, you're going to have to wait till September next year. The only thing I know about Twiggy is that she was on the Muppets. I know that she was a model and I know what she looks like, but I don't know anything else about her apart from the fact she was on the Muppet Show once, and she did My One and Only on Broadway with Tommy Tune. That's all I really know. So maybe I need to go and see what Twiggy's life is all about, because currently I know nearly nothing. Back to Christmas, and it's a Christmas Carol, but this time at the Lowry, and it's going to star Claire Moore as the first female Scrooge. Well, not the first ever, I imagine, but the first in this musical, this version of A Christmas Carol. So it's the Alan Menken musical version, and funnily enough, Claire Moore actually played Mrs. Fezziwig in the film version of this show back in, I think, about 2004. Kelsey Grammer played Scrooge, and I think Jane Krakowski's in it, Ruthie Henschel's in it. I've never seen it, and it's got some of my favourite people in it. So I need to start making a list of all these Christmas films and shows that I need to go and see. But Claire Moore's done loads of stuff. She's been in everything. I think I've seen her in about 3 things. She's been storming the West End for a very long time, and her link to Alan Menken is actually quite an old one. She was the original Audrey in the West End production of Little Shop of Horrors. She was the first non-American actress to play the role, which I think is a really fun fact. So her and Alan Menken go way back, and now she's the first female Scrooge in a production of A Christmas Carol this Christmas in Salford. Alfred Hitchcock's classic film North by Northwest will be getting a new stage adaptation. So this is being produced by Wise Children, the company. This will be directed and adapted by their artistic director, Emma Rice. And it's going to premiere at the York Theatre Royal in March next year, and then will continue to tour. This was announced as part of kind of Wise Children's new slew of productions here, there, and everywhere. I've never seen a Wise Children production, and they're always apparently very good, so maybe I need to go along and see this. Obviously, the film starred Cary Grant. Again, never seen it. This episode is just going to be me going, oh, I've never seen this. Oh, I've never seen this. Because clearly I need to watch all these films that are being turned into musicals, or are already musicals, because it seems to happen all the time. But North by Northwest is a classic kind of title. Everyone knows it. And about a month ago, it was announced that they're turning Alfred Hitchcock Presents into a musical as well. So it's a good time for Alfred Hitchcock fans who want to go and see his work on the stage in kind of a new way and a new form. Stephen Sondheim has to be one of the most produced musical theatre writers in the UK, especially in and around London. They love his work, and rightfully so. And we've had so many productions over the last kind of 10 years, and even more so since his passing. And another one has been announced. So the musical Road Show, which is written by Stephen Sondheim, will run upstairs at the Gatehouse from the 12th of December to the 12th of January. So this is one of his lesser known works. It's one of his later works as well. Not many people know it. I don't really know it, and I am a Sondheim fan, and it's never been one that's kind of crossed me or one that's produced that regularly, so I've never been to see it, and I don't know many people who do know this show very well. It tells the story of Addison and Wilson, who are brothers, and their adventures across America from the beginning of the 20th century. It made its premiere in the late 90s with New York Theatre Workshop, and in 1999 it kind of premiered under the title Wise Guys, and it was directed by Sam Mendes and starred Nathan Lane and Victor Garber, so very great people involved, but that never went any further. It was then reworked as Bounce, that was the new title, in 2003 in Chicago this time, as kind of a pre-Broadway tryout. It was directed by Hal Prince, obviously longtime Sondheim and Andrew Lloyd Webber and theatre aficionado and collaborator, and this was with Richard Kind and Howard McGillen in the leading roles. It would then move to the Kennedy Center, but mixed and negative reviews ended up kind of stopping the show going to Broadway, and it never went any further. It had further rewrites once more, and it was now renamed Road Show, and this made its premiere at the Public Theatre in 2008. It was directed by John Doyle, who's done Company and Sweeney Todd, and it starred Michael Cerveris and Alexander Gemignani. So it's been quite a while since we've seen a major production in and around London, and it's seldom produced. And because not many people know this work, and even though it's by one of the most famous musical composers of all time, who has some really famous hits, you can kind of do whatever you like with it, because no one has those preconceived expectations of the show or the music or how it should be staged or how it should look. Of course, some people will do, but the majority of people won't. And I think that's so nice to be able to do that with a really famous composer's work. There's a few Andrew Lloyd Webber shows that are like that. There's a few kind of Jason Robert Brown shows that are like that. There are a few Stephen Schwartz musicals that are like that, where you can kind of do them without anyone going, oh, that does not like that production, or that wasn't like this. And I think that's really cool and really a really fun opportunity to have. And it's been announced that Mamma Mia will be touring the UK once again from the end of 2025. It will open in Southampton and then go to Bristol, then Oxford, then Edinburgh, and then a load more cities after that. I mean, Mamma Mia is a fabulous show. It's just camp and it's fun, and they've just got kind of the ingredients down to the perfect recipe for a jukebox musical that people will go back and see time and time again, as well as having a really, really successful movie musical that hasn't really affected it. If anything, it's boosted the popularity of the show. I'm always going to be a fan of Mamma Mia. I love ABBA, and I'm excited to see it tour the UK once again. Let's talk a little bit about some closures. So in the last week, we've had a few West End closures, including Hello Dolly, which closed after its summer run at the London Palladium. And it's been announced that the show's final week is the highest grossing week for a musical in the Palladium's history, which is crazy. And I thought that ticket prices were very reasonable for Hello Dolly. I don't know if they went up later on and as tickets became more in demand, but they were at the cheaper end for a West End production in 2024, so that's crazy that it's the highest grossing. It was kind of like, well, I think 1.2 million, which is insane, and you very rarely hear about grosses in the West End. On Broadway, they're released every week, and you kind of compare from week to week and the audience numbers, but here in the UK, they're not as widely publicised, and you often don't know, sometimes you don't even find out how many performances a show ran for. That's always quite difficult information to find out as well. I struggle with that when doing this or making my TikToks. I always struggle to find that information. So if anyone has anywhere where they can send me the information, that would be lovely. But yes, a very record-breaking musical at the London Palladium, and I've heard differing reports on whether the show might be coming back or whether they might be making a cast recording of it. Apparently not, because too many people are no longer available to do it, and it's rare, I guess, to record it after a show's closed. Usually you do it when the show is on, but who knows, maybe we will get one, maybe we won't, but I'm fingers crossed that we will. The big West End closure announcement this week was that Mrs. Doubtfire is closing next April. This is a much longer run than it had on Broadway. I saw the first ever preview on Broadway pre-COVID. They did 3 performances and then New York went into lockdown, and I was there for that first preview. It did come back in 2021, but after only a few previews and a month of performances, it closed. So unfortunately, it didn't have a very long life. It ran for about 80 odd performances. But Rob McClure did get a Tony nomination for Best Lead Actor in a Musical, and he was very good in that show. I thought he was brilliant, and I'm glad I got to see him. It's done a very successful US tour as well, so it has had further life. But here in the UK, it would have run for 2 years by the time it closes at the Shaftesbury. So they've done really well. I haven't actually been to see it again because often, if I've already seen a production somewhere and it's the same production, I'm not that fussed about going to see it again. But because obviously I saw the first preview, I imagine it's quite different to how it is in the West End 4 years later. So I will go back before it closes. But it's not all bad news because even though Mrs. Doubtfire is closing, they've already announced what will be taking its place. And that's going to be Just for One Day, which is the Live Aid Band-Aid musical. And this premiered at the Old Vic to really good reviews last year. And there's kind of been rumblings that it might be going to the West End, but obviously it's all just dependent on whether the theatre is going to be empty or not. But now they've got the Shaftesbury from May next year, and they're going to do a special gala performance on the anniversary of the Live Aid concert as well, which is really exciting. But again, great reviews. Never got a chance to see it at the Old Vic because it sold really well, and I was really busy at the time, so it never worked out. But yes, from May next year, Just for One Day, we'll be playing at the Shaftesbury after we've said goodbye to Mrs. Doubtfire. And at the Royal Exchange in Manchester, a major revival of A Midsummer Night's Dream has now been completely cancelled. So this has been a developing story over the last week or so, and they'd postponed performances and cancelled some, and it was all a bit confusing. And What's on Stage have stated that issues around the production have reportedly included cast injuries, technical hiccups, and possible tensions between the show's team and the venue. And the Stage have said that the management at the venue had concerns about some of the creative decisions that were due to be included in the play. So this has meant that unions have also had to get involved because contracts are being broken and this, that and the other. It's all gone a bit sour over at the Royal Exchange. I'm sure we'll learn more about why it's been cancelled and the reasons behind it in the coming days and weeks, but currently that's really all we know. Let's talk a bit about some other bits of theatre news. Let's start off with the Sadler's Wells East. So it's announced its inaugural season, and this is a new venue that had kind of gone under my radar. I didn't know much about this, but it's going to be in the Olympic Park, and it's opening in February, and obviously this new season is going to be a mixture of dance and world premieres and kind of everything in between, and half of all tickets are going to be £25 or less, which is amazing. And the capacity of the new place is 550 seats, and it's got a flexible auditorium and this, that and the other, but it just kind of gives Sadler's Wells another base in another part of London, which more people can go and see their wonderful work. Alan Cumming has been announced as the new artistic director of the Pitlochry Festival Theatre in Scotland. So this is going to be from 2025, with his first season, his programmed season, coming in 2026. This is such a great appointment for a smaller festival theatre to have a name like Alan Cumming, a recent Emmy winner for The Traitors in America. It's just going to really be brilliant for the venue, and the theatre itself is kind of in the middle of the Scottish mountains. It's not far from the border of the Cairngorms, and it's just a really beautiful theatre. I went on Google Earth and did a little kind of travelling round to find it, and it's lovely, and it's great to have such a high profile name in a venue where they produce so many different plays and musicals throughout the years, and I'd like to visit there one day. It's a long way to go to see a show, but I really would like to visit. It looks like a really lovely venue. And talking of artistic directors, the new artistic director of the Lincoln Centre in New York has been announced as Leah de Bessonette. She is the artistic director of Encores. She directed the recent Broadway revival of Into the Woods, but now she's been upgraded to artistic director of the whole of Lincoln Centre. And Bartlett Shear, who is currently resident director at the Lincoln Centre, has now got this new role of executive producer, which is quite exciting. But those two together, both really great minds who have done really great work both in plays and musical theatre, coming together to lead the kind of biggest theatrical institution in New York, is really exciting. We've talked about things that might be opening, we've talked about things that are going to be closing, but let's talk about things that are extending. This is the thing that happens all the time. Shows just extend their run, extend their booking period into whatever month or year. But in the last week, there seems to have been a really large amount for I don't know why. I don't know if it's the time of year, I'm not too sure, but it's quite exciting. So Mean Girls has extended its West End run to April 2025. They can book up until April now. Fawlty Towers has now extended its run to January 2025. Matilda has extended to May 2026, which I think is absolutely crazy, but they just know it sells. The Play That Goes Wrong has celebrated its 10 years in the West End in this last week, and that's extended into 2026 as well. Operation Mincemeat has extended its run through to March 2025. This was meant to be quite a short run of only about 8 weeks, but they've kept extending it because it's doing very well. And also Tina has extended to October 2025. So a lot of extensions and a lot of shows staying around for another year or more. Operation Mincemeat I've yet to see yet because the tickets are so expensive. Why are all the tickets the same price for every seat in that theatre? Because surely they're not all the same view. I've been there, I saw Women in Black there, and I didn't have a brilliant seat when I went, but you can't surely charge the same price for every single seat. I think it's ludicrous. I think it's a really odd business model and one that kind of puts me off going because I think it's just outpricing so many people going and makes it a bit elitist in a way. I don't think you should be charging however much they're charging for the back row of the dress circle for the same as the front row in the stalls. I've just had a look and they're charging £89.50 for the back row of the upper circle and every other seat for many performances over the coming months up until kind of the end of January next year, which is currently where they're booking until at the moment. That is insane and far too expensive. I would never pay that much to go and see that show, or any show for that matter, and I think that's ridiculous. Some film and TV news now. Wicked Part 2 will be released slightly earlier than expected on the 26th of November 2025. It's weird to think that they're already announcing, kind of starting to promote that one. We haven't even seen the first part. We don't even know how good it is yet. But they've started kind of sprinkling out bits about Wicked Part 2 and the little kind of teaser that they put out with just kind of the announcement of the date. It had a bit of For Good playing in the background, which is quite exciting. But yes, 26th of November next year is when we see the second part of the film that we haven't even yet to see. They've also announced what categories Cynthia Erivo and Ariana Grande will be competing in at the awards ceremonies. So at the Tonys, when this show first opened on Broadway, they put Kristen Chenoweth and Idina Menzel in the same category of Best Leading Actress in a Musical, with both being nominated and Idina Menzel taking home the Tony. But to avoid that in the very busy and very crammed film season, they've split it. So Cynthia Erivo, who is the main character in the film, the plot kind of does revolve around her, and I imagine with this new extended Wicked based upon the book and stuff, there'll be more substance to her character, so it does probably pad out into an even bigger leading role. Ariana Grande will be being put forward in the supporting actress category, which some people might think is bizarre, but I think it's probably the right decision to give them both a shot of being nominated and also both a shot at winning. Whether they will or not is another question. It does stop splitting of the vote in categories of the same actress in many films, and it's very rare that two lead actresses from one film get nominated in the same category at any kind of the award shows. So it's a good and I think very clever idea. Vanessa Williams and Nathan Lane will be guest stars on the new series of Elsbeth, which is series 2 of this programme. It's a spin-off of The Good Wife and it stars Carrie Preston. I've watched The Good Fight, which was the sequel to The Good Wife, but I've never seen The Good Wife, so maybe I need to go back and watch all of that as well. But Elsbeth is kind of another lawyer who features on the programme, and they've now given her a spin-off. It has many Broadway stars in it. Jane Krakowski was in series 1 and apparently was very good, and people were quite annoyed she didn't get nominated for an Emmy for her appearance. But yes, series 2 will star Vanessa Williams and Nathan Lane. A couple of other random tidbits from the week. Lea Salonga now has a waxwork at Madame Tussauds in Singapore. That's kind of all the information I've got for you on that, but I just thought I'd let you know because I think you need to look up the images of her standing with her waxwork because they're always so bizarre when you see a waxwork next to the actual person, and sometimes they're slightly not correct. It's one of my favourite things to do. And also, this is kind of a bit of a story on Broadway that's been a bit crazy this last week. So Mia Farrow, who is a very famous actress and is currently starring in The Roommate on Broadway alongside Patti LuPone, has tested positive for COVID, so she had to pull out. The show's barely been on, but she's already had to pull out for the foreseeable while she's getting better. And Marsha Mason, who is another famous actress, was associate director on the production and helped Mia Farrow quite a lot. So she got a call saying, can you please come and play the part on Broadway? And she did. She stood in for Mia with a script in hand at certain points and is going to be continuing playing the role while Mia Farrow gets better. And I just love stories like this when some but someone on the production has just been pulled in at the last minute and has to go on stage on Broadway and play a part to loads of paying customers, and you've never done this role before in front of anyone. I love stories like this. It's one of my favourite things, and it's the time when I remember that theatre is so it can change all the time, and you never quite know what's going to happen. And a couple of bits of casting news to round off this episode. Courtney Bowman is going to play Lauren in the UK tour of Kinky Boots from January next year. Obviously, it's going to have Johannes from Strictly in the lead role of Lola, as well as Dan Partridge as Charlie. I loved this show in the West End, and I'm so glad I got to see that original production, and I'm so glad it was filmed as well. I love when they film a show, but I'm glad to see this new production that's going to be touring in the country and see how they do it differently, and also see how good Johannes is, because obviously he's a very good dancer, very good performer, but it's a hard sing. Those songs aren't easy, so I'm going to be really intrigued to see how he does in a musical theatre role and kind of stepping out of his Strictly comfort zone. And also, Keala Settle will lead a new musical called Fly More Than You Fall at the Southwark Playhouse from the 18th of October to the 23rd of November. She plays the mother of a child, and the mum has terminal cancer, and it's all about how the child deals with that, and I imagine it's going to be quite a heavy-going musical with quite a heavy subject matter, but with Keala Settle, I'm sure it will be a wonderful time. And this week's Into the Woods vaguely fun fact is linked to kind of highest grossing musicals. I looked at that Hello Dolly number and it got me thinking about what is the highest grossing musical of all time. And you could probably guess that it's one that we all know, and it is. It's The Lion King. And in the US, it's made nearly $2 billion on Broadway in ticket sales, which is insane. But worldwide, the show, and this is in 2019, so I imagine it's already crossed over this. Worldwide, the show had made $9.1 billion. That's a lot of money. And bear in mind, that was in 2019, so I imagine that is now way over the 10 billion mark. I can't wrap my head around that. That's insane. The amount of money that they must make. I think it was said that in the West End, the show made £30 million a year. £30 million a year, which is crazy. And our ticket prices are lower than Broadway, so I just dread to think how much that's making every week on Broadway. But that's your fun fact for this week. And that's it for another episode of the Into the Woods podcast. Thank you very much for listening. Don't forget to leave a review on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify. It really does help get the podcast out there and get more listeners and more people involved. Don't forget, if you have any local theatre stories of their rejuvenation, don't forget to email me or message me. I'd love to hear from you about that. But I will talk to you once again next week.